Welcome to Day in Life podcast. Today we're going inside the world of freelance software development with Alex, a senior web developer who works with startups and SaaS companies. For more than 10 years, she has helped startups turn product ideas into working web applications. While building a career she can run from almost anywhere. But what does his job actually look like? How does it work? How much can you make? What can go wrong? And what do people completely misunderstand about it? Along the way, you'll also hear the English professionals actually use in this industry. Let's find out.
Welcome to Day in Life.
Hi, Alex. Welcome to the podcast, and thanks for joining us. Before we get into the details, how do you usually describe what you do when someone asks?
Hi, John. Thanks for having me. I'm a freelance software developer. I've been building web products for a little over 10 years, mostly for startups and SaaS companies.
10 years. Were you always freelance?
No. I started as a back-end developer. Over time, I moved closer to front-end and product work, and eventually, I went freelance.
And now you can work from pretty much anywhere, right?
Pretty much. I've worked from places like Spain, Vietnam, and Bali while keeping the same type of clients, and that freedom is one of the best parts of the job.
That sounds like the dream. Laptop, Wi-Fi, maybe a beach somewhere.
It does, yeah. But that's the Instagram version.
I thought so.
The reality is that freelancing is not just coding from a nice place. You also have to find work, manage deadlines, communicate with clients.
All right, let's make that concrete. When a client hires you, what are they actually paying you to do?
Usually, they're paying me to turn a product need into software people can actually use. My background is mainly web development, with a strong front-end focus. So that can mean a dashboard, a SaaS application, a checkout flow, or an internal tool.
So, mostly the part the user sees.
Mostly, yes. I also work with APIs and back-end services when the project needs it.
Who usually hires you?
My clients are usually startups, software companies, or agencies that need extra senior capacity for a few weeks or a few months.
And do they always know exactly what they want you to build?
Not always. Sometimes they have a clear design and need someone to build it. Sometimes the problem is less clear. The app is slow, the code is difficult to maintain, or the team cannot ship a feature safely. In that case, part of my job is diagnosis.
So, there is some investigation before you start coding.
Exactly. I work independently, but rarely in isolation.
So, even as a freelancer, you're part of their team for a while.
Exactly. I join the client's team, use their Git repository, review pull requests, and talk with designers, product managers, and other developers.
So, the developer alone with headphones image isn't quite right.
Not really. There are definitely hours like that, and I actually enjoy them. But that's only one part of the job. The job is to understand, build, communicate, and deliver.
You said the job is to understand, build, communicate, and deliver. Let's follow that process. Where does the work usually start?
It usually starts with the client explaining what they need and what is not working well enough today.
And once they contact you, what happens first?
Usually a discovery call. I ask what they want to achieve, who the users are, what already exists, the deadline, and the main constraints.
So, you spend some time understanding the project first.
Exactly. I need enough clarity to decide what the project includes and how much time it may take.
And that's what developers call the scope.
Exactly. The scope is what is included, what is outside the project, and what the client should expect. Then I can give an estimate of the time and effort.
Can you give me a simple example? Imagine you're building a new dashboard for a SaaS product.
I start by reviewing the design and checking how the existing product works. Then I break the work into smaller tasks.
And then, what happens before the client actually sees it?
Then I build the feature, connect it to the backend, test it, have another developer review it, deploy it to a staging environment, and once everything looks good, release it to production.
That's quite a few steps. Who is usually involved around you?
It depends. There might be a designer, a product manager, and a back-end developer. On a smaller project, I may do most of it myself.
And how long can a project like that take?
A small feature can take a few days. A larger feature or product can take weeks or even months.
Which part is usually the hardest?
Turning an unclear request into a clear technical plan. Once everyone agrees on the goal and the result we want, the technical work becomes much easier.
And once the scope and the time are clear, we get to the question everyone wants to know. How do you decide what to charge?
Most of the time, I charge a day rate. Sometimes I use a fixed project price, but day rates are easier when the scope can move.
So, the client is paying for your time, day by day.
Exactly. Software changes while you build it, so a day rate gives both sides more flexibility.
Give us a realistic number. What could a senior freelance developer charge per day?
In my case, depending on the project, I usually work around 600 to 750 euros per day.
That sounds like a lot, if you multiply that by 20 working days.
Yeah, but you can't read that number like a salary. Some days are client work, some aren't. And there are business expenses too.
What kind of expenses are we talking about?
Taxes and social charges, but also software, insurance, accounting, hardware, holidays, and the time I spend finding the next project.
So the headline number and what you actually keep are two different things.
Very different.
And what changes for a beginner?
The rate is usually lower, but the bigger issue is often having fewer billable days.
Billable days?
Days you can actually charge to a client. Learning, admin, finding new work, or waiting between projects may all be necessary, but they are not billable.
So when you plan the year, how many billable days do you assume per month?
Around 15 on average. Some months can be higher, especially on a long project, but I don't build my business around 20 billable days every month.
What tends to waste the most time?
Usually, things we did not plan for. Unclear scope, too many meetings, extra revisions, or long gaps between projects.
So at some point, your calendar becomes the limit. Is that why you're building other things on the side?
Exactly. The biggest freedom is choosing where and how I work. But my income is still linked to my time, and there are only so many days I can sell. To grow the service itself, I'd need a team or an agency model. Personally, I'm also building other income streams with a small YouTube channel and a SaaS product.
So, freelancing also means thinking ahead, not just waiting for the next client. All right, now for the day in life part. Take me through a normal day from the moment you wake up. What time does your day usually start?
I usually get up around 7. The first thing I try to protect is some exercise. If there's a gym nearby, I train there. Otherwise, I do a short workout. It clears my head and gives me energy for a long day. Then I shower, have breakfast and coffee, and I'm usually at the laptop around 9.
9 o'clock. Laptop open. What's the first thing you do?
I check messages, the project board, and anything that changed overnight. I want to know if a client is blocked or if something in production needs attention before I disappear into code.
So you don't start coding immediately?
Not immediately. First, I need to understand the situation and choose the priority. Then from around 9:30 to noon, I try to protect a block of deep work with as few meetings as possible.
What are you actually doing during that deep work block?
Usually, one important technical task. I might build a feature, debug a problem, write tests, or review a pull request. And honestly, a lot of that time is reading code, documentation, logs, and tickets before I change anything.
And around midday?
I usually take a real break, around 12:30 or 1. I try to get away from the screen, eat, and reset before the afternoon.
And what does the afternoon look like?
Usually more fragmented. That's when I have more client calls, planning, estimates, or pull request reviews. Then I go back to technical work. On a good day, around 60% of my time is still coding, debugging, testing, or reviewing code.
What can completely destroy that schedule?
A production issue. If real users are already affected, the plan for the day disappears. You stop what you're doing, check the logs, reproduce the problem, fix it, test it, and get a safe version out as quickly as you can.
Let's say it's 5:30. The client work is done. Are you finished for the day?
Not always. That's often when I spend some time on my own projects. I might answer a new lead, work on the SaaS, or prepare something for YouTube. None of that is billable today, but it can create opportunities later.
So, when do you finally close the laptop?
Usually around 7. I try to set a limit, because when your office is basically your laptop, work can easily expand into the whole evening.
And after that?
That's when I try to enjoy the freedom I chose this job for. Dinner, a walk, seeing friends, or exploring the place if I'm traveling. I try to make the evening feel like an evening, not just another work session.
So that's the real day in life. Workout, deep work, client calls, maybe an emergency, then your own projects. Not exactly the laptop on the beach version.
Not exactly.
And even that still leaves out a lot of invisible work. What don't people see?
People see the final interface, but they don't see how one small change can affect several other parts of the application.
Give me a simple example.
A client may ask for one small button. The button itself can be quick, but the work behind it can take much longer.
What can be hiding behind one button?
User access, data changes, API calls, and testing. The visible part may be simple, but the system behind it may not be.
So the least visible work is often the important work.
Exactly. Debugging old code, updating dependencies, writing tests, and documenting decisions are not glamorous, but they keep the product reliable.
And you're also thinking about what could go wrong later.
All the time. I check edge cases, review changes carefully, think about security, and make sure we have a safe way back if a release causes a problem.
And what if a release goes wrong?
Then we can go back to the previous version while we fix the problem. That's a rollback, and ideally, you plan for it before the release.
How much of this is communication with the client?
More than people expect. If I find a risk, the client doesn't need a technical lecture. They need the impact, the options, and the next decision.
And when all of those safeguards matter at once, that's when things get interesting. Can you give me a real example?
One story I always remember happened 2 days before a startup's public launch. The founder called me and said, "We need to rebuild the checkout."
2 days before launch? Why was that such a big problem?
Because checkout is the payment flow. If you break it, customers can't complete their orders. They had discovered that a special discount case was breaking orders, and the marketing campaign was already scheduled.
Could you rebuild the whole thing in 48 hours?
No, not properly. So the first decision was to reduce the scope.
What did you protect first?
The critical path, the steps the customer absolutely needs to complete a purchase. Then, we put the new version behind a feature flag, added extra logging, and kept the old checkout ready as a rollback.
Feature flag?
Basically, a switch that lets us turn the new version on or off. It gave us control if something went wrong.
Launch morning. What happened?
Traffic jumped. We saw one error pattern in the logs, fixed it, deployed again, and the campaign continued.
So it wasn't the perfect system.
No, it was the safest solution for the deadline. That taught me something important. Under pressure, good engineering is often about reducing risk, not showing how much code you can write.
That was a good decision under pressure. But I guess some of your best lessons came from decisions that didn't work so well. What's a mistake that really changed how you work?
My most expensive mistake was accepting a fixed-price project with a very vague scope. The client wanted a simple dashboard, and I gave a price too quickly.
So the word simple was the trap?
Exactly. I priced the project before the scope was clear. Then came roles, permissions, exports, notifications, mobile changes, and 3 different types of reports.
And each new request sounded small.
None of those requests were crazy, but together they almost doubled the work. I finished the project, but my effective day rate was terrible.
So the fixed price stayed the same, but every extra day pushed your real day rate down.
I was working more and earning less. That experience changed the way I sell projects.
What do you do differently now?
Now I write a statement of work and define what is in scope and what is out of scope.
And if the client adds something important halfway through,
then we use a change request, so the extra work is clear and agreed. I also break large projects into milestones.
at the time, did you blame the client?
A little, probably. But later I realized the requests themselves were not unreasonable. The real problem was that our agreement was too vague.
So, the lesson wasn't simply avoid difficult clients.
No. Make the agreement clear. Good boundaries protect both sides.
That story is a good example of how much of the job happens before the code. What's the biggest misconception people still have about what a developer actually does?
The biggest misconception is that professional software development is mainly about typing code. Code is the visible part, but a lot of the value happens before and after it.
Before and after.
You have to understand the business problem, define the scope, choose trade-offs, test the result, review code, deploy it, and maintain it.
What do beginners usually get wrong?
Beginners often focus too much on frameworks and not enough on fundamentals, debugging, and communication.
What about maths? Do you need to be brilliant at it?
Another bad idea is that you must be a genius at mathematics. For most web development, you need logical thinking much more than advanced maths.
And do you need a big team to get started?
You also do not need a huge budget or a team to start. One good developer can build a lot today.
And now, the big one, AI. Does it replace the developer?
Not simply. It replaces parts of the workflow. It can write repetitive code very quickly, but it does not own the consequences when the payment system fails or user data is exposed.
Can an experienced developer often spot AI-generated code?
Often, yes, but not always. Not because AI has one obvious style, but because you notice patterns. Duplicated logic, unnecessary functions, weak error handling, or code that works, but does not fit the architecture.
So the dangerous part is that it can look correct.
Exactly. That's what worries me today. Code can compile and still be unsafe. You can miss input validation, access controls, expose a secret, or use a dependency you should have checked.
So AI makes development faster, but it doesn't remove code review.
No. I still review and test it carefully before release. AI may improve, but today's speed is not the same as reliability.
So where does the human value move?
The valuable developer is moving from person who writes code to person who can make good technical decisions.
And that brings us back to you. You don't just write code anymore, you also run the business around it. What changes when you become the business owner?
The biggest change is that you stop being only the developer. You also have to find work, handle contracts and invoices, plan ahead, and sometimes say no.
So you're doing several jobs at once?
Exactly. On a client day, I'm the developer. On another day, I may be finding the next project, preparing a proposal, or dealing with the business side.
What do you mean by cash flow?
It is the timing of money coming in and going out. For a freelancer, clients do not always pay on the same day you send an invoice, so you need to plan ahead.
What do you delegate today?
Bookkeeping, and sometimes specialist design or testing when someone else can do it better.
What do you keep for yourself?
The first client discovery, the technical direction, the main client relationship, and the final responsibility for what I deliver.
You mentioned an agency earlier. When would you actually hire someone?
Not because of one busy week. I would do it when I have more good work than I can handle for a while, and when the way I work is clear enough for someone else to join without reducing quality.
And what kind of person would you look for first?
I'm looking for someone who communicates early, asks good questions, and can make progress without constant supervision.
What numbers tell you if the business is healthy?
I keep it simple. Billable days, how much work is in the pipeline, how quickly clients pay, and how much time I'm spending on work I cannot invoice.
And what about the SaaS and YouTube channel?
I track those separately. Right now, they're additional projects, not income I can depend on. The goal is to slowly build something that is less directly tied to my billable days.
What tends to break first if you grow too fast?
Usually communication. More clients or more people mean more context to share. Without clear processes, small misunderstandings become expensive very quickly.
So growth can actually reduce the freedom you became freelance for.
Exactly. If growth creates chaos, you haven't built a better business. You've just built a more complicated job.
And one way you've kept that freedom is by working with clients in different countries. What changes when the client is on the other side of the world?
The technical work is mostly the same. What changes is communication. When the client is in another country, you may have different time zones and fewer moments when everyone is online together.
So you can't rely on meetings for everything.
Exactly. A lot of the work becomes asynchronous. You need to leave clear written updates so someone can understand the situation, even if you're offline when they read them.
What does a good update actually include?
Usually, 4 things. What I finished, what is blocked, what I need from the client or the team, and what happens next.
And if someone's English isn't perfect,
That's fine. Perfect English is not necessary. Clear English is. A short, precise message is much more useful than a complicated sentence that nobody understands.
give me an example. Let's say you're blocked and you need something from the client.
I might write, I'm blocked by the missing API access. I need the credentials from your team. Once I have them, the next step is to test the integration.
Do clients work very differently from one country to another?
Yes, the working style can change. Contracts, meeting habits, decision speed, and the level of written detail are not always the same.
And can the price change with the market?
Yes, rates depend on the market, the client, the technology, and the responsibility. I don't assume the same rate or contract will fit every situation.
Give me 5 terms someone might hear in their first week.
Scope, estimate, pull request, deployment, and technical debt.
We've heard most of those already. Technical debt is the new one. What's that?
It's work you postpone today to move faster, knowing you may have to come back and fix or improve it later.
So, for someone working internationally, what's more important than sounding perfect?
Being clear. If you can explain what you did, what is blocked, what you need, and what happens next, you can already contribute effectively to an international team.
And for someone listening who wants to join one of those teams in the first place, where should they start?
I'd start with the web fundamentals, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Before worrying about frameworks, understand how a page works and how the browser runs your code.
So, not React on day one.
Not on day one. Once the basics are solid, learn Git, understand how APIs work, then pick one modern framework like React or Vue.
Do you have to study computer science at university?
No, it can help, but people also enter through self-study, training programs, or other routes. What matters is being able to build and finish real projects.
What counts as proof that you can actually do the work?
Finished projects. In tech, proof matters. A diploma or a good profile doesn't automatically prove you can deliver what a client needs. So at the beginning, build as much as you can. Websites, small apps, SaaS projects, anything you can actually finish and show.
So in tech, does your portfolio almost become your CV?
For many freelance opportunities, yes, or at least the proof behind it. Keep it updated and share your work regularly. When you contact someone, you can show what you built instead of only saying what you can do.
So, the goal isn't to impress people with complicated solutions.
Exactly. The client wants a result that works reliably. Simple and robust is often better than clever and fragile.
But simple doesn't mean careless.
No, it still needs proper testing, security checks, and code that another developer can understand later. The point is to avoid complexity that doesn't help the user or the business.
What else would make you trust a beginner?
Curiosity, clear thinking, good communication, and evidence that they can finish what they start.
What do real projects teach you that tutorials don't?
How to work with existing code, estimate your work, communicate with a team, and make decisions when the situation is not perfectly clear.
What should a beginner avoid?
Trying to learn every tool at once. Learn one stack well, build something real, get feedback, then add more.
How long does it take to become good?
There's no fixed number. You can become useful quite quickly if you build consistently, but professional judgment takes real projects and repetition over time.
And once people start noticing your work, how do you turn that skill into a business?
I'd start smaller than most people imagine. At first, the business is basically you, your laptop, your reputation, and your ability to find work.
So no office, no employees, no expensive branding.
Not at the beginning. I need reliable equipment, internet, basic business tools, and enough cash saved to give myself time to find work.
You mentioned runway. What does that mean here?
Runway is how long I can cover my costs while I build the business and look for work. The first clients often come from people who already know or can see your work. Former colleagues, agencies, founders, referrals, or people who found your portfolio.
So the portfolio becomes a sales tool too?
Exactly. I don't want to say, trust me, I'm a developer. I want to show what I built and explain what problem it solved. I would start with the essentials: a reliable computer, backups, accounting, insurance if I need it, and a simple website or portfolio. I wouldn't overinvest in an office, branding, or tools I don't need.
Because the proof matters more than the image.
Exactly. A polished brand doesn't replace real work people can see. For many people, starting on the side makes sense.
What does that give you?
Time to build the portfolio, grow the network, and learn how to find clients before going full-time. I would go full-time when I have some cash saved, 1 or 2 realistic leads, and evidence that clients will actually pay my rate.
And if someone starts today, how different is the job compared with a few years ago?
The biggest change is speed. I can build and test ideas much faster than a few years ago.
What's driving that change?
AI is a big part of it. It can generate boilerplate, explain an error, write a first test, or help me explore a code base.
So does that make the job easier?
Some parts, yes. But faster coding doesn't automatically mean better software. Someone still has to understand the requirements, choose the architecture, test the result, think about security, and sometimes decide what should not be built.
So where does the value move?
More toward judgment, understanding the product, making trade-offs, and knowing what is safe enough to release. It's easier to make a first prototype now.
Does that mean the job is easier to enter?
At the beginning, yes. You can build and test an idea much faster than before.
But that's still different from professional delivery.
Very different. A demo can prove an idea. Professional software has to keep working after launch.
So which skills become more valuable as the tools get better?
Over the next 5 years, product thinking, system design, testing, security, and communication will become more valuable.
Where do you see the biggest opportunity?
For developers who can combine technical skills with one business domain. If you understand e-commerce, finance, logistics, or healthcare, for example, you can use AI as leverage instead of competing with it.
That sounds like a very different job from when you started. Looking back, what do you know today that you wish you had known then?
The best developers aren't the people who know the most syntax.
Reduce uncertainty. What does that look like in practice?
I ask better questions before I write code. What problem are we solving? Who uses it? What happens if we do nothing? What is the simplest version that solves the real problem?
Which is almost the opposite of trying to impress the client.
Exactly. When I started, I thought complicated solutions made me look more professional. Now, I prefer the simplest, robust solution that solves the real problem.
If you had to start again tomorrow, what would you change?
I'd build small, real projects earlier, talk to users earlier, and get comfortable with Git, testing, debugging, and communication before chasing every new framework.
And the business side.
I'd build a network from day one. A lot of good freelance work comes from trust, an old colleague, a previous client, a referral, or someone who has seen your work.
So your reputation becomes more valuable over time.
Absolutely. Good work brings more good work. If you're reliable, clear, and honest when something goes wrong, people remember that.
Alex, one last question. If someone listening wants to become a developer, what's the first thing they should do tomorrow?
Build something small and finish it. Put it online, show it to someone, and improve it from feedback. Don't wait for the perfect course or the perfect moment. In tech, real work gives you proof. Keep building, show your work, ask for feedback, and you'll improve much faster.
That's a good place to end. Alex, thanks for joining us. Was there a technical term or English expression that was new to you? If you're on YouTube, subscribe. If you're on Spotify, follow the podcast. Thanks for being with us, and I'll catch you in the next day in life.
Make the call, take the fall, get back up, give it all. One door shuts, find another way. Lose today, come back strong by the next day. They see the win, they never see the climb. Different work, different dreams, same fight with time. No perfect map, no perfect line. You can't go wrong where you want it, gotta try. Make the call on the day, on the choice, on the line.